We started this meeting at Vertex in 2010, where we spent 3 days just talking about free energy calculations and how they might eventually be useful for drug discovery, and what the opportunities and challenges were in doing so, and had about 65 attendees. And over the last few years, it's grown quite enormously. Actually, we sold out this room, which is pretty surprising, and had to turn people away, so there was a long waiting list. We've tried to start fixing that by live streaming for the people who couldn't be here, and that's been a neat part of the last few days. We can't quite live stream, but we can delay stream, that is. More recently, in the last few years, we've added a component on talking about kinetics in drug discovery, and I'll get back to why that's important. We've got some great organizers, and I really have to give a special shout out to Greg Bowman, who's going to be our first speaker today, for doing a lot of the coordination for this part of the series. The real goal here is to bring together people to try to build a community and learn from the challenges that we're facing right now and understand what the opportunities are in actually applying these methods to drug discovery. So we had it in Boston, in Cambridge, to actually get folks from pharma to come out and tell us about what they're struggling with. How can we help? And we really want to learn from failure. So I encourage all of the speakers to talk a lot about what didn't work, what lessons did you learn from that? And there's now some cool venues to actually share lessons learned in things like the Living Journal of Computational Molecular Sciences that Michael Schertz and David Mobley and Dan Zuckerman have founded. So talk to them if you're interested in publishing that sort of thing. We have to thank our hosts. We opened Monday night with Silicon Therapeutics, a little get-together there and a few talks, and we're very, very thankful for spending these days in Novartis' beautiful new lecture hall. And a lot of great sponsors have put in funding or offered food or cocktails to help make this a more welcoming occasion. We have a Twitter hashtag, hashtag DrugMSM, and you can add hashtag discuss if you think we should talk about these topics, if you just want to post asynchronously. We also have a Slack that many of you have been invited to, so feel free to chat and discuss on Slack too. We'll be checking that occasionally. And we will be uploading the talks to show on YouTube later, and we've already got 1,000 views or something like that of the talks of the last few days. It's very important that no coffee or food be brought into this conference room. This is a brand new room. It's beautiful. It's very comfortable. So let's be kind to our hosts in honoring that. You can have coffee outside and just hover outside if you like. There is a code of conduct for the meeting. I think we already read this at the beginning of the meeting, but it's on the website as well, so make sure to review that. We want to make this an open and welcoming place and really have this be a safe space for people to exchange ideas and really make progress. Today we're going to have a bunch of coffee breaks and lunch with some talks in between. Really, so why are we here talking about kinetics, right? So everyone I've spoken to in pharma over the last 4 or 5 years has basically said, okay, free energies are great, thermodynamics is great, but can you predict kinetics? Can you predict off rates? Can you predict something to do with the dynamics of my system? What is the mechanism of unbinding? All of these things. So here, we really want to get to the question of why is this important? How could we do it? And then can we potentially use this for design? Can you actually predict and which molecules are going to perturb the kinetics in a particularly defined fashion? I think that's sort of a holy grail challenge for us. And why would you care, right? Cells are not open systems, right? Cells are not closed systems, they're open systems. And if you have efflux or transport or degradation, then something like the residence time of the inhibitor on its target may be the most important thing and not the thermodynamic binding free energy. There's also fun cases of multi-step binding that might be relevant to actual function and activity. Covalent inhibitors have become super important in the last few years. So these are inherently kinetic phenomena where free energies aren't even relevant in terms of what you actually measure experimentally because they change with time. And then there might be really exciting other interesting roles for kinetics or protein motion or dynamics or allosteric targeting that these tools could be brought to bear in. So I think we're pretty convinced that there's some interesting opportunities. The question is, how do we do this? There's a bunch of different technologies that might be brought to bear here. One of them is in the title here, Markov state models. I think a lot of you are familiar with these, but for those of you who aren't, we basically try to decompose the very complex conformational dynamics of a system into a bunch of discrete states that are kinetically related to each other. They mix rapidly kinetically. and then make infrequent transitions to other conformational states. There's other interpretations of this too, where we're trying to approximate the transfer operator that evolves the statistical dynamics of the entire system, and a Markov model is a good way to do that with low error, and there's lots of great theory that's come out for that. There's also other methods, of course, transition path or interface sampling, which is basically Monte Carlo in trajectory space. So instead of making a perturbation to a conformation, you're making a perturbation to a dynamical path. But there's also many other great technologies too. Weighted ensemble methods are particle filtering applied to trajectories, things like that. So we're going to hear a few of those different kinds of methods today. I'd love to hear about what other methods people have been thinking of, and what other technologies might be useful in drug discovery. And we're really facing this issue here that can we design for kinetics is a wide open question, right? We don't have a Zwanzig-like perturbation theory for kinetics. I mean, not a useful one it is. You can always reweight trajectories, but it may not be useful to do so. So how do we come up with something that's as simple and elegant and as powerful as free energy perturbation has been for free energy calculations and for thermodynamics that we could apply to kinetics to actually design things? So without further ado, I'd like to get our first speaker up here. This is Greg Bowman. Greg is, besides our fearless organizer, Greg is a assistant professor at the Washington University of St. Louis and has been really key in putting together a lot of the practical tools, things like MSM Builder, that people actually use to construct Markov state models. And he's then started a laboratory which has both experimental and computational components and is doing really, really awesome things with them that bear on drug discovery. So without further ado, I'll let him tell us.